Hello everyone and welcome to TechUptic. Today we are pushing the boundaries of flexibility in Windows 11 deployment. In standard unattended installations, everything is static. The system simply follows a fixed set of instructions. In this video, however, we will explore how to empower answer files with PowerShell scripts to make the setup process adaptable to different requirements. Our goal is to go beyond just skipping setup screens. We are building a professional deployment foundation that bypasses hardware constraints, removes unwanted components, and triggers custom logic based on the environment. By the end of this video, you will have a technical grasp of how to automate complex configurations using a single installation media, allowing you to establish a high standard of deployment in your own lab or enterprise environments. If you're ready, let's get started. The brain of our system is the autounattend.xml file. We don't just use this file to bypass next clicks through the setup wizard. We use it to configure the operating system at a foundational level. So at this level, we will configure region, currency, and Windows activation settings, partitioning the disk according to our needs, bypassing Windows 11 hardware requirements like TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot, creating a local administrator account with a predefined password, and so on. On the other hand, the second layer is where the real engineering starts. Once the desktop appears, we will use a custom PowerShell script to basically bring this whole deployment to life. This script fires up a clean GUI for us, and based on our selections, it handles all the provisioning dynamically. Right at the top of the interface, the very first decision we make is our network deployment type, whether to join this computer to an Active Directory domain or keep it in a workgroup. By default, it is set to workgroup, which keeps things simple. It renames the PC based on its chassis type, generating a computer name with a random 4-digit ID at the end. But if you switch it to Active Directory, the script completely unlocks. It handles both the renaming and the organizational unit placement in a single step. In our specific environment, we have structured for organizational units based on 3 branch offices. When you select a location, the script dynamically maps out the target path and automatically drops the computer right into the respective organizational unit. On top of that, it renames the machine dynamically based on the department you select along with a random 4-digit ID at the end. Finally, we have a section where you can check off which enterprise applications you want installed automatically in the background via WinGet. With this setup, you can easily customize the entire workflow to fit your exact infrastructure. My goal in this video isn't just to give you a static template to copy, but to explain the mechanics behind this scenario so you can take these principles and build something completely tailored to your own needs. Alright, let's jump straight into the screen and see how we built this. First of all, we have to download the ISO file of Windows 11. To do this, we can either use the public website, which is hosted by Microsoft, or we can go with the M365 page. If you want to install Windows 11 Enterprise Edition, you cannot find on this website. You should go to the M365 page instead. I will make the demonstration for the Windows 11 Professional Edition. So I open this website and go a bit down, and under the download Windows 11 this image ISO for x64 devices, I am clicking Windows 11 Multi Edition and click confirm. And after that, I have to choose the product language and click confirm again. After that, you have to click the 64-bit download to install the ISO file. I will fast forward the video on this so we can continue without waiting. Okay, download is finished. The next tool I have to download is an ISO application. I am going to download AnyBurn. You can download from this website. Just click the free version and install it. Because I already installed it, I don't need to do it right now. Let's close it. Now we have to create the XML file. To do that, I'm going to use this website. This allows me to create the unattended XML file. If I do this manually, it can create many mistakes because of human error. So using this kind of unattended generator will help me to do this configuration with zero error. Let's configure these. On the regional language settings, let's choose English and the location Turkey here. And for the language preferences, I'm going to choose Turkish. Okay. For the Windows PE stage, you have to click the generate a CMD script to handle the Windows PE stage because we want to configure this installation with zero such. If you want, you can disable Windows Defender or other things. In my environment, I don't need these things. For the image, I'm going to choose Windows 11 Pro. For the partitioning and formatting, the hard disk drive will be 0 for me. For Windows 11, I'm going to choose the partition as GPT. There's no problem here. But for this part, I'm going to create two partitions here. For C drive, I'm going to rename it as system. For D drive, I'm going to rename it as data. Let's say we have 250 gigabytes totally in our disk. When we do that, we can keep the system files on the C drive and we can keep the others on the D drive. So on this configuration, when the operating system fails, we can still save the data from the D drive. To configure these things, I'm going to copy these settings here to make this happen. I said that 100 gigabytes will be the primary and it will be named as system. The other one will be named as data and it will store the rest of the data accordingly. For the make this assertion page target disk, we don't need to assert that there are no partitions on the disk. So keep in mind that uncheck this target because when there is more than one partition on your computer which you are going to format it can ask you there are some partitions here, what do you want to do? So because we don't want to intervene anything on the deployment, and also keep in mind that when you are going to give this size, make sure that you have 100 gigabytes and more in your setup. Otherwise, it can fail. For our other settings on the partition and this, we don't need to do anything here. Let's skip these. For the Windows edition, you can either give your product key on the respective computer or you can use a generic product key to install this edition. This will help you to install the operating system, but it will not activate it. So in my case, it is okay for me. I will keep this option, use a generic product key to install this edition of Windows. For the processors, Intel and AMD 64 bits, it is okay for us. Let's keep it that way. For Windows 11, as you know, there are some hardware requirements. As enabling this option, we can bypass them. Let's do it. Also, we can allow Windows 11 to be installed without an internet connection. So we can check this as well. For the computer name, we can generate a computer name like this or we can specify it here. But in our case, since we are going to configure it with a PowerShell script over a graphical user interface, we allow the system to generate a random name. And after that, we will intervene it according to our needs. Let's keep it that way. We don't need to change anything here. For the time zone, you can either let Windows determine your time zone based on language and region settings, or you can explicitly select it. In my case, I'm going to select it here, which is +3 Istanbul. This section is important. We have to give an administrator account and a password for it because when we want to run the PowerShell script, it will use this admin account and its password in the first logon. So let's give it a specific account name here like tech admin. Let's change it display name as techoptic admin and give it a password. and make it administrator. We don't need to add a user here. Let's clear it. For the first logon, we don't need to specify anything, but we can select obscure all account password in your autounattended XML file with base 64. We want to do this because when we specify passwords here, we don't want to keep the password as clear text. We don't want to add a Microsoft or local user accounts, so let's skip these. Password expirations, we don't need to specify anything, so password do not expire is okay for us. Account lockout policy, we don't need to change anything here. Let's use the default policy. For file explorer tweaks, you can change it according to your needs. I am going to change only always show file extensions and use classic context menu. So this is the right classic menu in Windows 11. I'm going to check these options. Also, I like the search bar on the taskbar as just icon. So I am going to select it here. Choose icons to display in the taskbar. Use default icons is okay for us. We can disable widgets. This hides the news and weather widget in the lower left corner in Windows 11. I think this is useful. Also, we can check do not show big results when searching in the start menu or the search box. Since this is the Windows 10 settings, we don't need to change anything here. Let's skip it. For Windows 11, let's select remove all pins. So Windows 11 start menu, we can remove all pins because we are going to delete some applications to debloat the operating system. We don't want to see them there. For system tweaks, we don't want to disable the updates or user account control or smart app control. We can enable the remote desktop services for technicians to make remote connections on the computers. Optionally, we can enable this. Also, we can allow execution PowerShell script files. So this runs the command as remote sign for the execution policy, which is fine for us, and we can enable this. So we can hide Edge first-time experience to use the web browser faster. We can enable this. We can also disable core isolation virtualization-based security, which can improve the performance. If you're not imaging the computer in a virtualized environment, you can safely check this option. For visual effects, we don't need to change anything. For desktop icons, we can change some of them. For example, we can include this PC, recycle bin, and control panel in our desktop, which is useful. We don't need to change anything here. Folders on start. Virtual machine support. Generally, we don't use this imaging on a virtualized environment, so we don't need to check here anything. But in your case, maybe if you need Wi-Fi setup, you can also use this option in your company, which will make things faster. In my environment, I don't need to do anything here, so I am just clicking skip Wi-Fi configuration. Express settings, we don't need to change anything. Lock settings as well. Sticky keys, we don't need to change. As you can see, there are many things you can configure. Personalization settings, we don't need to change anything. Remove bloatware is important, so we need to configure this to debloat the operating system and make it faster. But the application that I am going to select, which may not be appropriate for you, so I just check these ones generally acceptable for many environments. But please make sure all of them are okay for you to remove from the operating system. I don't need the 3D viewer. Also, I am not using Internet Explorer, mixed reality, people, PowerShell 2.0. This is the older version and which is not secure in my opinion, so I can select it. Tips and wallet, we can select it. Bing search, I'm not using it. I'm not using these. Also movies and TV. One sync paint photos. Solitaire, weather, Xbox, calculator is useful. A feedback hub, we can uninstall it. I'm not using maps here, also news. Paint 3D. We have Paint. We don't need Paint 3D. Skype is not used generally. And your phone link can be selected. These are not the ultimate ones, but in my environment, I can safely select to remove them from the operating system. Run custom scripts. There are some sections that scripts can be run, but this is not the stage that we want to use. So we are ignoring here. And default user scripts, we are not running a script for default users. So we are skipping here as well. But first Logon script is the one that we want to intervene because it says the first user to Logon is typically an administrator. In this case, these scripts will run with elevated privileges. So this is that we need to run a display the GUI for us to make selections. So this is the right stage. Please make sure the .cmd file is selected and then copy this command. I'm going to share this script in my website so you can copy safely. We don't need to use any application policy here. And please make sure that use file name rather than option unchecked. It just renames the XML file, but in our case, this is not we want to do. So keep it unchecked. And with this configuration, please click download XML file to download it on your hard drive. I assume that you download the AnyBurn application and install it in your computer. Open the application. On the selections, please click the Edit Image file and select the ISO file which you downloaded from the Microsoft website. Right now we have to add two files here. One is the unattended XML, the other one the PowerShell script. Let's create a PowerShell script first. Give it the exact name to work and paste the codes here and click Save. Okay, let's jump back to application and click Add. From the download section, click Tecaptic Provisioning, press 1 and autounattend.xml and click Add. Make sure that they should place in the root directory, not inside some folders. Let's click Next and give it an appropriate name. Win11 Tecaptic Light Touch and create now. This will create another ISO file as adding the two files inside it. Okay, it is done. Let's click Exit. As you can see, the ISO file is created. Right now, let's jump back to the virtualization environment. I created Active Directory previously and also created three organization units, as I stated before. The main organization unit name is Tecaptic, and under it, the level 1 sub-organization units, Istanbul, London, and Montreal. Under them, there are two organization units, computers and users. I also enabled the DHCP options, so this new computer will get the same network, and when we choose the specific configurations on the GUI, it can automatically join to the Active Directory. I also created 250 gigabytes hard disk and gave appropriate hardware resources here. I just need to change the ISO file to target the newly created one. Click OK. Let's run the new computer and start imaging. I will fast forward the video as much as possible, but I also want you to see the interactions happening on the computer. The first phase is finished with zero-touch deployment. As you can see, we run a PowerShell script, and behind the start menu, you can see the GUI that we created with this script. As you can see, there are two sections, workgroup and Active Directory. So if we select workgroup, we just select the applications that we want to install on this operating system and keep it that way. But we will demonstrate the Active Directory section. Let's click the Active Directory. For the location, as you may remember, we have 3 locations, and let's click Istanbul. And for the department, we specify 4 departments, so we can select any of them. Let's click Human Resources. For the enterprise applications, I just wanted to demonstrate that there are 3 applications here, but in your case, there may be many. So let's click Google Chrome and Acrobat Reader. To be able to join this computer in the Active Directory domain, we have to specify the credentials here. We specify this one as an username. For the password, we are entering it. So let's click Start Provisioning. We are expecting that this computer should be under the Istanbul Organizational Unit and under the Computers O with the predefined computer name. If it is a success, then we can see it after the restart. The computer is restarted. Let's check the Active Directory if the computer created or not. Let's refresh it. As you can see, the computer account is created successfully with predefined naming policies. We specified that the department name will be the human resources, so the HR came at the first place. And then with some VMI queries, we could be able to fetch the data as a PC. If it would be a laptop, it should name as LAP. And then the last 4 digits, it is randomly assigned. So the computer created here successfully. And let's check the end device. Let's send Ctrl-Alt-Delete to log in with the TechOptic admin. Let's check the computer name and also the workgroup status. As you can see, the device is joined to the domain and named successfully. Let's check the partitions. As you can see, we created 2 partitions here, system and data, and we assigned system 100 gigabytes, and the rest of them will be stored in the D drive. And let's check the applications. As you can see, the Google Chrome and the Acrobat Reader is installed successfully, and we can confirm it from the programs and features as well. I believe this is the end of this video. I hope it was useful for you. Thank you for watching. See you on the next time. Bye.